The strapado, also known as garrucha, was a form of torture used during the Spanish Inquisition and other periods. It involved suspending the victim by the wrists, which were tied behind the back. This method typically resulted in the dislocation of the shoulders and could cause severe pain and long-term damage to the nerves, ligaments, and tendons. There are three variants of strapado. Basic strapado. The victim's arms were tied behind their back, and they were suspended by a rope attached to their wrists. This caused intense pain and potential dislocation of the shoulders. Squasation. This variant involved a series of drops, where the victim was allowed to fall until their descent was abruptly stopped by the rope. This added a jerking motion that increased the stress on the shoulders and could lead to broken bones. Weighted strapado. In this version, weights were attached to the victim's feet, increasing the strain on the arms and shoulders and causing additional pain and potential damage to the legs and hips. The rack, also known as the potro, was a notorious torture device used during the Spanish Inquisition and other periods. It consisted of a rectangular wooden frame, slightly raised from the ground, with rollers at one or both ends. The victim's ankles were fastened to one roller and the wrist to the other. As the interrogation progressed, a handle and ratchet mechanism attached to the top roller were used to gradually retract the chains, slowly increasing the strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows, causing excruciating pain. By means of pulleys and levers, the rollers could be rotated on their own axis, straining the ropes until the sufferer's joints were dislocated and eventually separated. Water torture, known as toca or tortura del agua, was a method used during the Spanish Inquisition that closely resembles modern waterboarding. This form of torture involved placing a cloth in the victim's mouth and then pouring water over it. The water would saturate the cloth, making it difficult for the victim to breathe and creating the sensation of drowning. This method was designed to induce extreme physical and psychological distress without leaving visible marks on the body. The boot, also known as the Spanish boot, was a form of torture that involved placing a wooden or iron frame around the victim's foot and tightening it to crush the bones. This method was designed to inflict excruciating pain and cause severe injury without necessarily leading to death. The boot was typically made of wood or iron and was designed to encase the victim's foot and sometimes the lower leg. The frame was tightened using wedges or a crank mechanism. As the device was tightened, it applied increasing pressure to the foot, crushing the bones and lacerating the flesh. The thumbscrew, also known as thumbkin or thumbikin, was a torture device first used in early modern Europe. It was a simple vise designed to crush the fingers or thumbs of the victim, often causing extreme pain and permanent damage. The victim's thumbs or fingers were placed between the iron bars. As the torturer turned the screw, the bars would tighten, crushing the appendages beneath an iron bar. Some versions included sharp points or studs on the interior surfaces to puncture the nails and increase the pain. Whipping, also known as flogging, was a common form of punishment during the Spanish Inquisition. This method involved beating the victim with a whip or similar instrument, often causing severe physical pain and injury. The whip used during the Spanish Inquisition was often a multi-tailed device, sometimes stiffened by being dipped in melted pitch, which would tear the flesh with each stroke. The number of lashes varied depending on the severity of the crime and the discretion of the inquisitors. Sentences could range from a few dozen to several hundred lashes. The breast ripper, also known as the iron spider, or simply the spider, was a gruesome torture device used primarily on women during the Middle Ages, including the period of the Spanish Inquisition. This device was designed to mutilate the breasts of female victims, often as punishment for crimes such as adultery, abortion, or other offenses deemed severe by the inquisitors. The device was clamped onto a single breast, and the torturer would then pull or tear the breast away from the body. In some cases, the claws were heated to increase the pain and damage. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, was a brutal method of execution used primarily in Europe from antiquity through the Middle Ages and into the early 19th century. This device was designed to inflict maximum pain and suffering on the condemned, often leading to a slow and agonizing death. The condemned person was tied to the wheel, either spread-eagled or face down. The executioner would then use a heavy iron bar, or hammer, to break the victim's bones, starting with the legs and working upwards. The goal was to cause severe mutilation without immediate death. Starvation, as a method of torture, involved depriving victims of food and water, leading to severe physical and psychological suffering. This method was used during the Spanish Inquisition and other historical periods to break the will of prisoners and extract confessions or information. Burning coals were used as a method of torture during the Spanish Inquisition and other historical periods. This method involved placing hot coals on various parts of the victim's body, causing severe burns and excruciating pain. The primary goal was to inflict extreme pain to coerce confessions or information from the victim. It was also used as a form of punishment and intimidation. Burning coals were often used in conjunction with other torture methods, such as the rack or strapido, to increase the overall suffering of the victim. Burning at the stake was a common method of execution used during the Spanish Inquisition and other historical periods, particularly for those found guilty of heresy. This method involved tying the condemned person to a large wooden stake and setting a fire beneath them, leading to death by burning. Executions by burning were often public events intended to serve as a deterrent to others. Large crowds would gather to witness the execution, which was sometimes accompanied by sermons or other religious ceremonies. In some instances, mechanisms were used to shorten the victim's suffering, such as attaching a container of gunpowder to the victim, which would explode when heated by the fire, or strangling the victim before the fire was lit. Comment below which time period's punishments you want to learn about.